Epsilon 581. Of my country and of my family, I have little to say. All memory of them was wiped from my mind, except it hadn't worked, at least not entirely. I dreamed of them. There were trees in my dreams, dotting the landscape of green hills, often dense enough to obscure the sky until they broke away into a field of gentle low hills carpeted in green. It must have been my home, but I had not been there in a long time. A mother with dirty blonde hair and pale blue eyes stroked my face when I slept. I knew she was my mother by the intensity of love in her eyes as she gazed at me. She spoke to me, but her voice came to me muffled. Her presence shimmered and vanished into a mist before I could ever make out the words. I would wake, beating my pillow, calling out, "What did you say, Mother?" Other nights I ran across grass-covered hills, frequently glancing over my shoulder. Someone was chasing me, but I was unafraid. I caught only glimpses of a dark-haired man whose laughter filled the air. As I laughed in return, he called to me, but the word was muffled. Was it Sarah? I couldn't be sure. Is my name Sarah? Farah? Clara? Waking from one such dream, I stirred in my bed. I was in a small room painted white. My sheets, blankets, and pillows were so perfectly white that it was difficult to differentiate one from another. Still, the pillows could not quite meet the stark whiteness of the walls. A nurse dressed in white, knee-length tunic entered my room without knocking. No such privacy was afforded any of us. Most of the other subjects didn't have enough recall to be irritated by the lack of nicety. My eyes narrowed as she entered, but I had long ceased complaining. I learned quickly not to reveal how much I remembered. The nurse moved across the room in bright white shoes, white hose, with her hair tucked under a white head cover, leaving only her face and hands exposed. "Epsilon 581, it's time to get up," she instructed me. "Yes, Nurse Jones." I clambered out of bed. Our beds were one of the greatest luxuries afforded us. They were large and soft, the kind of bed made for encouraging deep and dreamless sleep. While Nurse Jones scanned the machinery monitoring my health, I pulled a white cotton shift over my head. As the fabric fell softly over my body, I unconsciously ran my fingers over the small lump in my left arm. This is where the chip had been placed that linked to the monitors. "How did you sleep?" she asked. "Fine." We both knew it was a lie. She could see from the readings my sleep had been restless. She replied. "Perhaps we need to recommend a sleep aid." I rolled my eyes. I didn't want a sleep aid, but it was useless to argue. "It's a big day today," she chirped. "A big day, sure," I responded. "Yes, Madam President will be arriving for her infusion today." Nurse Jones spoke as though it were exciting news. She didn't have to endure the infusion process as I did. "It is a great honor to be chosen, Epsilon 581. Make sure to show gratitude when you meet her." I had nothing to say, so I simply gave a single nod of my head. To her, it was a big day, an honor, but to me, it was the beginning of my end. Heading to the cafeteria, Nurse Jones instructed, "You must eat well this morning. You'll need your strength, and Madam President needs the nutrition." The cafeteria was filled with girls, all dressed the same as me. I can't say how old the youngest were. I didn't know how old I was. My few memories were sketchy, and I didn't have a way to count time. It was not something allowed to us. Everything in the facility was meant to keep the subjects passive. Everything was as white as they could manage because color contains memory. The food was unseasoned because taste contains memory. We weren't allowed outside because light and sound contain memory. Memory contains longing. Longing contains discontent. Discontent breeds rebellion. The food we ate was the only thing that had any color anywhere aside from our skin. Rather than oatmeal, I was served a rare steak with eggs and crispy potatoes and a glass of orange juice. Despite the lack of seasoning, it was admittedly a treat. My only friend, Zeta 176, sat next to me with her bowl of mush. "Are you scared?" she asked. I shrugged. "I don't want it to be my turn, if that's what you're asking me, but I am tired of this place. Perhaps it will be a relief." "I'll miss you." Zeta 176 wiped at her damp eyes. The words, "It's going to be okay," stuck in my throat. That was a lie. It wasn't going to be okay. Her turn would come, the same as mine had. Then her blood would be slowly drained from her body over the course of several days, recycled and processed to become the elixir infused into Madam President. It was an honor, we were told, to keep Madam President alive. If not for our sacrifice and that of many who came before, Madam President would die, and then where would the nation be? The people needed Madam President. The people loved Madam President. If they didn't, why had they just voted for her 47th term in office? Nurse Jones approached the table. "It's time," she said. I wasn't the only girl whose number had come up. We were chosen in groups of 10. The girls in the room fell silent. Eyes turned to those of us standing to be escorted to the great hall. It was not customary to say goodbye. Only Zeta 176 moved. She hugged me, brushed away her tears, and smiled. I tried to smile in return, but I know it must have looked horribly awkward. My smile didn't come from anywhere inside me except the place where I wanted Zeta 176 to stop crying. We didn't go straight to the procedure room. First came the pomp and circumstance. We made our way to the Great Hall to await Madam President's arrival. I was the first to arrive so I could take my place in the front row from where I would be escorted to the dais after Madam President's arrival. There I would bow low before her and offer myself up for the good of the nation. The rest of the hall filled with nurses and girls. The large room hummed with whispered conversations, shuffling feet, and gently whooshing fabric as everyone came in and found seats. The room grew still as Nurse Riley, the head nurse, made her way to the crystalline podium at the center of the dais. Rows of chairs for Madam President's entourage flanked it. Nurse Riley cleared her throat before speaking. In the grand tradition of this institution, established long ago with Madam President Dobria's first infusion, we welcome you again today to witness the brave young women who will bring forward their very lifeblood as a tribute to our glorious nation. As we know, President Dobria has sacrificed her own death to live for the sake of the nation. The nation is Dobria, and Dobria is the nation. In unison, the entire room responded. The nation is Dobria, and Dobria is the nation. As Nurse Riley closed her speech, the Presidential Guard marched onto the dais. Their entrance was uniform. Someone began chanting, "Dobria." The room joined in until the cry of Dobria thundered through the space. To me, they sounded like automatons capable of responding to stimuli, yet lifeless. I suppose I should have been panicking. After all, I didn't want to die. Only I didn't think there was any point in it. President Dobria, dressed in the same stark white as her guard, gracefully made her way onto the dais. Her hair was also a beautiful snowy white, framing a face that should have long ago shriveled away to a white skull, but instead retained a youth stolen from generations of young women like me. She raised her hand to quiet the crowd. "Bring the tributes forward." Nurse Jones took me by the arm, leading me to the line of 9 other girls. We joined hands and made our way forward. We formed a semicircle around the front of the dais, our faces towards President Dobria. As if one person, we all knelt, raising our hands, still clinging to one another as if in an ancient worship ritual. Nurse Riley, her countenance grave, signaled to us to rise. We rose as one, continuing to cling to one another's hands, and marched from the stage. The infusion process was not so much painful as it was exhausting. The first round of blood cleansing complete, we were sent back to our rooms. Not all of us would make it past the second cleansing, and none of us would make it past the third. Drained, I drifted quickly to sleep. My mother came to me. The dark-haired man was with her, and I knew that he was my father. As I lay in bed, she sat on its edge and stroked my face. "Zara." Her voice was not muffled, but clear and lovely. "Wake up, Zara. It's time to go." She smiled down at me, as did my father. He then stood and began packing a small bag before hiking it over his shoulders and onto his back. I noticed that their glances at one another were furtive. Something was wrong, but they were not letting me in on the secret. The two of them moved quickly. My mother handed me clothes. You must dress warmly, darling. We're going on a long, lovely hike. Quickly now. There was a noise from outside. My father froze, and the color drained from his face. He and my mother exchanged one long look before he said, "Stay here," and left the room. I heard shouting before there was silence. "Zara, get in the closet, hide, and don't make a sound. No matter what happens, not one sound." She shoved me in as the door of my room burst open. I could see through the small slats in the door. Two men armed with small swords entered. My mother, standing to her full height, faced them. "Where is the child?" they demanded. "Gone. I sent her through the window." One of the men raised his sword above my mother's head. I was terrified. I gasped. The man's eyes shot to the closed door. He seemed to be looking straight into my eyes. My mother never even glanced towards me. She continued to stare straight at the man. She gave no sign of my location, but it was too late. The man slashed the sword, striking her. My mother's body slumped and fell to the ground. My screaming woke me from my sleep. My face was wet with tears. My mother, my father. Soon I would join them. I would maintain my dignity as I had maintained my fragments of memory. I would go to my death gladly, knowing they hadn't been able to erase me from my own mind. I thought of my mother as I had last seen her, going down.